I'm going to attempt to do the impossible, and that is explain my yeast infection to the general public. I cannot do this subject justice in a 45-minute video, but I'm going to try. First, I want to talk about music. I believe that my men have started a radio station for Church of Gail Music, and I produce the music. I send my favorites to Brent Spiner, and then I believe that music reveals who we are. Jesuit musical taste is proud, arrogant, driven with fanatical emotions, and it's demon possessed. And you can get an example of that if you listen to Laurie McBride's video at Order of the Jesuits YouTube. You can hear the music. It's just like I described. My music is all love excelling, grandiose in worship of God and Jesus, courageous, tender, and brilliant. And that's my taste in music. And I believe that we have started our own radio station. Brent hasn't communicated with me about this. However, I do know that some of our Church of Gail members have come to Brent and complimented him on the music that he's chosen for services, and stating how well they support his sermons. And Brent said, I have to give Gail the credit for the music because she's been picking the music and not me. So we're getting, from what I understand, this radio station is a hit. And Jesus himself, when he met with me, said that my taste in music is superb. Now I'm going to go on to another subject. The Jesuits at their website, crazygale.com, state that, let's see if I can fix it. My hair is always difficult. Anyways, they state that, I probably made it worse, just leave it alone. They state, I'm so vain. They state that that I take like 100 supplements. I'm going to tell you something. Jesus has gotten me off of all of my supplements. When he took me to circles, when Jesus allowed a negative situation to become positive for me. Romans 8:28, and we know that all things work together for good to them who love God, to them who are the called according to his purpose. When my evil relative lied and produced a statement about me, which was 80% lies that made me appear like I was really crazy, she would use that as the basis. So my mother submitted that to the judge, and this dumb judge believed it. And got me Baker acted to go to circles of care. Jesus took a negative situation and made it positive. Jesus said, Gail, I allowed this negative thing to happen to you, and even used your evil relative. He didn't call her a real relative, that's my term, but he said, I allowed you to go to this place, this is what he said, for drug supplement rehab. Jesus told me, get off of all your supplements. And Jesus is my doctor now. He's my physician. I have the best doctor in the universe, and I do whatever he says. He said, Gail, I'm going to start a work on your yeast infection. And I thought, sure, man, because everything else I've tried didn't work. So he got me. I'm not on any supplements right now. The only thing I'm taking is the Seroquel. I take a multivitamin supplement. And as needed, I take Advil. And as needed, I take Sudafed. Because as you can see, I had this constant congestion problem. And then what else am I taking? I'm not on much. Because Jesus told me to get off of everything. He said, don't even take probiotics. He doesn't want me to take vitamin C or CoQ10 or any of that stuff. So I'm off of all of that stuff. Let me go back. And he told me to take an antihistamine, like Allegra or Zyrtec. And that's it. I am off of everything. He said, I want you, and then he instructed me, he said, Gail, you need to eat well and try to get your rest, have regular bedtime hours. So I'm following the instructions of the divine physician, Jesus Christ. By the way, Brent Spiner has an MD from UCLA Medical School, and the Lord Jesus speaks to me through Brent whenever Brent gets on Skype, and through Brent's emails. And so I'm following Brent's medical advice that he gets from Jesus himself. Now, I'm going to explain to you what my condition is, okay? Now, if you have symptoms like this, please do not think that you have candidiasis. The reason I know that I have it is because I was diagnosed with a doctor with this condition. Back in Seattle, they did a stool culture, and they found the microorganism in my gut. But he also found another microorganism in there. And this doctor told me, he said, not only do you have the Candida albicans, but you have another yeast. He said, you've got the most resistant form of yeast in existence in your system. And I believe that's the one that's been causing me problems. He also found evidence that I have candidiasis from the antibodies. They did, and he found out something else. He discovered, they found the antibodies to yeast toxin. I'm not sure about them. But he discovered by studying my blood that I have developed an allergy to yeast toxin. Obviously, I could not have developed an allergy to yeast toxin unless I was infected with yeast. So that's how I know I have it. He treated me with amphotericin. I think that's what it was. Anyways, let me go into a little. I'm going to try to give you a broad overview of what chronic yeast infection is. And like I said, I can't do this subject justice, but I'm going to do my best because the Jesuits are playing on the public ignorance about this to portray me as crazy. So I'm going to attempt to educate the public about this. A very good book on this subject is Back to Health. This book is like 10 years old, but it's still pretty good. I got this from my doctor in Seattle. It was Dr. Ranheim. He's pretty good. He recommended this book for me. It's called Back to Yeast, a comprehensive medical and nutritional yeast control program, written by Dennis W. Remington, MD, and Barbara Higgy-Swayze, registered dietitian. Okay. So this is basically, I'm getting a lot of the information that I'm presenting to you is information for physicians section. So if I'm talking over your head, forgive me. It's just that this is the fastest way to get the information out because I don't have a lot of time to discuss this. Candida albicans is the most common form of yeast infection, I believe. My yeast is worse than Candida, okay? So as I read this, keep this in mind. The particular yeast and organism that I have eats its own poop, which means if you try to kill it, it explodes and releases its toxin, it eats its toxin. So conventional, even what he recommends doesn't work with what I have. But I'm going to explain to you what Candida is like, and then I'll try to jump up from there onto mine. Okay? Candida albicans. I have this as well, but I have the other one too, which is worse. Appears to cause diseases in humans as a consequence of a number of factors. It can invade the tissues directly. It produces various specific toxins and toxic metabolites. It may provoke inappropriate host immunological responses. It may contribute to nutrient deficiencies, it sure does, and may interfere with endocrine function. It's been doing this in me. It's been shown to have the ability to invade virtually every tissue in the human body. And there's a controversy about whether this illness can become chronic. Most doctors think it's just acute, like down in the vagina, and that's it, or thrush, you know. There are two extremes. There are those who think it can only be acute, and then those who think it's chronic. Although the two extremes mentioned above are fairly well accepted by most physicians, many doctors have expressed disbelief that Candida infections can become chronic. And the reasons for this are interesting. I'm kind of saying this out of order. The doctor thinks that the reason that a lot of doctors will not accept the truth about the fact that this disease can become chronic is because, first of all, this doctor wants to say this. All of the other criticisms of chronic candidiasis listed below contain no scientific references to discredit the concept, not one article. In all of the negative literature published about chronic candidiasis, not a single doctor has ever reported treating a single patient using trusses. There's a guy named TRUSS who's got a protocol about how to treat chronic candidiasis. Not a single doctor has tried to do this. Not one patient, after repeated, exhaustive, and recent world literature searches, there is really only one negative scientific study. And see how I'm constantly Itching my nose, that's yeast. I've got it, man. That even comes close to evaluating CC or chronic candidiasis. I'm going to say CC as for short, okay, for chronic candidiasis. Only nystatin was used. That's a yeast-killing medicine. And none of the other components of Truss's treatment protocol was used. This could hardly be considered a fair or adequate evaluation of this condition. Here's another reason doctors may oppose the concept of chronic candidiasis. It's of note of interest, the Executive Committee of the American Academy of Allergy and Immunology have published a position paper on candidiasis hypersensitivity syndrome. Must exist. Okay, I want to hit the most important stuff. The expanded role of candida in causing illness does not fit in well with the older concept that a specific microbe caused a single discrete clinical illness. This is like, you remember back in the 1800s when they used to bleed their patients, you know? And then all of a sudden some people say, oh, you shouldn't do that. This is along the same line. These doctors are in the dark ages. Chronic candidiasis is basically an iatrogenic disease, often caused by repeated use of antibiotics and or cortisone. To admit that this condition existed would be to accept some element of blame for having produced it. That might explain why the doctors don't believe in this. The allergists and infectious disease people probably use more broad-spectrum antibiotics and corticosteroids than any other group of doctors, and thus would be more to blame. Allergists and infectious disease specialists consider themselves to be the experts in their respective areas. Since chronic candidiasis has both a strong allergic component, it certainly does, and an infective component, this disease should fall within their realms. Since the disease was described and popularized by outsiders, their egos may not quite accept the idea that anyone else could develop valid concepts in their domains. Most doctors have received very little training in the area of nutrition and nutrients and feel uncomfortable using dietary treatments. Yeah, they like the more expensive medicines. If it doesn't make sense, there's a buck in it. Doctors compete for the same patients, particularly conventional allergists and environmental allergists. Well, they don't want to lose their patients to the environmental allergists, like the doctor who diagnosed me with candida, chronic candidiasis. So yeah, if it doesn't make sense, there's a buck in it. That's why we don't know about it, folks. There's some greedy doctors out there that don't want people to know about this because they might lose some patients and their egos might be bruised. Those critical of chronic candidiasis generally express similar concerns. Most are critical of the wide range of non-specific symptoms reported for this disorder. All of us that work with CC share this concern. It makes diagnosis and validation of the disease more difficult. Their disbelief in no way negates the observations of literally thousands of doctors who have verified the reports of Truss, Truss. If you're serious about wanting to know the truth about this illness, do some like a Google search on Truss and see what he has to say. Okay, and believe it or not, he's kind of outdated because Jesus is my doctor on this, and he's been educating me about how to treat this, especially the version I have. So now let's go into the clinical evidence that they've gathered about chronic candidiasis. Okay, I've already explained to you why some doctors don't want to acknowledge this, including many medical schools that are in the dark ages for various reasons, which I've already discussed. To understand chronic infections with candida or with yeast, there's more than one version of yeast. Like I said, I've got the most nasty one out there. It is necessary to understand something about their structural characteristics. Candida can exist in a simple yeast form, living mainly on mucous membrane surfaces, which is called superficial candidiasis. In more severe cases, candida can produce hypha, those little things that stick out and leach onto tissues, which can invade between the cells and even into the cells of the host epithelium. This is called invasive candidiasis. Hypha, invasion of the deep tissues, may explain the resistance of chronic vaginitis and other chronic candida infections to conventional topical therapy, which is what most yeast-killing medicines do. Candida may also be spread to various parts of the body through blood-borne chlamydospores disseminating candidiasis. There is some controversy as to which form of candida is more virulent. When both the yeast and mycelial form of candida are injected into experimental animals, the yeast form is more lethal, probably due to toxin content. Some particularly invasive strains of candida appear to be more prone to occur in the hypha phase. I think I've got both. I've got a lovely infection here. Candida albicans then can exist in the human body in a wide spectrum of states. It can exist as a commensal organism. That means it lives in you friendly, you know. It's not merely a part of the normal flora, causing no disease at all. It can become acute. That means short-term. Superficial, regional, self-limiting infections. It can become invasive and chronic. That's what I have, causing deep resistant infections of various mucous membrane structures. It can disseminate widely to cause infection in almost every tissue of the body. It can become very fulminating and cause rapid death through extensive tissue damage and toxin production. By the way, this is how Vladimir Putin's wife died, Larisa. We found out because we thought she died of breast cancer, but Vladimir told us the truth when I was trying to do research on him to make a movie about him and his wife, how she died. And he said, Gail, I can't. He was crying so much. He actually had to go see Gerard Butler, the psychiatrist, to get some treatment because he couldn't deal with his wife's death. And the reason why is because poor Vladimir, he thought the doctors told him that his wife had breast cancer. So they treated her with chemotherapy. Well, after she'd had intensive chemotherapy treatment, the doctors went to Vladimir and said, we made a mistake. Your wife does not have breast cancer. She has yeast. What I have, that's what she had. The same germ that I have. But they said, unfortunately, because we used chemotherapy on her and she had chronic yeast infection, she's near death, and we don't think we can reverse the damage. And that's how she died. So I've got to make a correction on all of my statements where I said she died of breast cancer. Vladimir let it go out that way because it was just too overwhelming for him to have to admit that the stupid doctors killed his wife. You may say, well, why would chemotherapy kill someone with yeast? I'm going to go into that, okay? A competent immune system is necessary to keep various microorganisms, including candida, from becoming too numerous and causing diseases. So because they gave her chemotherapy, her immune system was compromised, and that's why she died from the yeast. Candida albicans, as well as other organisms, produce a variety of chemical substances that protect themselves from the human immune system, which might otherwise completely eradicate them. So because they're so resistant as it is, if the immune system is weak, you don't stand a chance of beating this disease. And that's why she died. Cause of death for Larisa Putin: chronic systemic yeast infection. That was her cause of death. Vitamin deficiency may increase vulnerability to candidiasis. It's like a roller coaster. Candidiasis can cause vitamin deficiency, and because I've discovered this yeast organism I have feeds on the B vitamins, irons, it likes sugar, and that's why I'm constantly battling iron deficiency, B vitamin deficiency, and I'm always craving carbohydrates. So it's like a roller coaster. You take the vitamins to give your body the iron and B vitamins and everything that you need, and then the yeast eats it all up first, and then you get the leftovers, and it's like a cycle here. Like you can't win. Antibiotics, especially the broad spectrum antibiotics, kill competing bacteria. Let me give you a brief education about the gut. In the gut, you have a lot of good bacteria, and they have to have the proper balance of these good bacteria in order to keep the bad bacteria or the bad microorganisms in check. If the balance gets off, then the bad germs take over. So you've got good germs and bad germs in your gut. There has to be a balance of a certain amount of the good germs to keep the bad germs in check. When that balance gets off, the bad germs take over. So when you take antibiotics, you not only kill good germs, you not only kill bad germs, you kill good germs. Therefore, because you throw off the microbial balance in your gut, you are killing the bacteria that hinder the candida organism or the yeast organism, and that's why that germ grows when people take antibiotics, especially broad-spectrum antibiotics. So antibiotics, especially the broad-spectrum antibiotics, kill competing bacteria. Oh, by the way, my particular germ, the one that's really causing me trouble is not Candida albicans. It's another yeast, a very resistant yeast, and I believe we've discovered my yeast is like a half-breed. It's like half bacteria, half yeast. And it's like a hybrid. And it's the worst form of yeast out there. So that's why the Jesuits, even in one of their own websites, called it a yeast bacterium, because that's what it is. And I have found that when I take antibiotics, I actually get this germ in check for about 24 hours, and then it rebounds and comes right back. That's because it feeds off its own toxins. So anything you take that kills it, you're gonna hold it back for maybe 24 hours, and then it feeds on its own toxins like fertilizer and rebounds and multiplies and comes back. That's why I can never get rid of it. You say, well, how do you get rid of it? I'm getting there. Okay, now I used to take a lot of supplements to deal with the candida and the symptoms that was caused by the candida. Like I said, Jesus got me off of all of them. Jesus said, Gail, he said, you need to stop taking all of your supplements. They have, like the fillers and just the supplements themselves, have ingredients in them that are feeding your yeast infection. Apparently, even the probiotics were no good. Jesus said you need to get off of that. Apparently, the particular yeast that I'm infected with, which is the worst one out there, it feeds off of fillers and all of the supplements I was taking, including probiotics, even fish oil. The Lord told me to quit taking that. He said, Gail, get everything from food. This germ that you have feeds off of the fillers and the ingredients and all of those supplements you're taking, and they're like fertilizer. And while certain ingredients in that hinder the germ, other ingredients promote the germ. So it's like a roller coaster. So you might say, well, then you wasted your time taking all those supplements. Well, I was going with the amount of medical knowledge that I had, which was the latest medical knowledge we had on how to treat this based on the concepts in this book and on some concepts from acupuncture. And basically what I was doing was I was keeping the germ in check to an extent. In other words, some of the ingredients in the fillers were actually killing the germ or hindering the germ, but then there were other ingredients in the fillers that were feeding the germ. So you might say, well, maybe you would have been better off not taking them. Without Jesus's divine intervention, I believe that I had a form of, it's kind of, to give you a good analogy, you know, when you have a form of lethal cancer, and they do chemotherapy on you to try to keep the cancer in check. Well, same principle here. I actually had a form of lethal yeast, and it wouldn't have mattered what I did, nothing would have worked. Because if I took like nystatin or diflucan or amphotericin or any of the germ-killing organisms, what they would have done, all they would have done was hold off the death. In other words, they would have they were like staying the infection but not getting rid of it, and then it would come back. So basically, anything I took, I was killing the germ and feeding it at the same time. And it was like a cycle. And all I was doing was holding off the inevitable. Without Jesus' intervention, I'd probably be dead right now. I believe that what was happening, that when I was taking those supplements, that Jesus Christ was actually doing a healing on my body and allowing some of the stuff in those supplements to help me. Finally, when he made his personal appearance to me through Brent Spiner via Skype, he just went right out and told me, he says, Gail, I'm the one who's going to have to heal your yeast infection. And I don't want you to take those supplements because they're interfering with my work. So he said, get off of all of them. So I am no longer taking them for that reason, okay? So you may say, well, what about people who have your yeast infection? When you said you were taking stuff like, you were taking yeast killing medicine. Yeah, I was taking caprylic acid, which kills candida, though I don't know if it was doing much for the yeast that I have. I was also taking B vitamins, C vitamins, iron supplements because the yeast was eating up all my iron. Multivitamin, which was good because you do get very nutrient depleted with this. And the organism thrives when you're in a nutrient depleted state. So a lot of the stuff I was taking, I wouldn't necessarily say it was a disaster, but it was a waste of my money. And because there's nothing out there that would have worked. It would be like trying to treat a lethal form of cancer with with chemotherapy when you're already at the end stage, when you're near death, kind of like that. I mean, that's so discouraging. Well, people do die. There are illnesses out there are no cures for. So that's basically what I've been infected with. But because the death comes on so gradual, because the germ gradually takes over your body, the Jesuits can use this germ to discredit people like me as crazy and make it look like I killed myself because I took all those supplements. No, it wasn't the supplements. It's the germ that's killing me. The supplements were actually kind of holding it off, and but it didn't get rid of it. So it was like there were some parts of the supplements that were helping the germ, some parts that were hurting me. So, but now that Jesus Christ himself is doing a miracle healing on my body, he said, Gail, get off of all those supplements because you don't need them. They're a waste of your money. And because I'm going to work on your body. And when you take those supplements, they interfere with what I'm doing. You might say, well, why doesn't Jesus just take it all at once? Well, I asked him that. And he told me there are several reasons. He says, number one, I said, you probably don't want to do it because if you just did a miracle cure just like this, then Zach Knight would come in and do the same thing with his technology and try to imitate you. And then I wouldn't be able to differentiate between the two of you. Jesus said, that's it. He said, also it builds character in you to fight yeast. So that's another reason he won't completely get rid of it. So it's his will for me to have this germ. Anyways, let me explain how chronic candidiasis can be cured. You see, the reason I can't be cured except for Jesus' miraculous healing is because I have a yeast organism that is a yeast bacterium, and it's worse than Candida albicans. It's the most virulent, resistant form of yeast in existence. That's the one I've got. And that's the one that killed Vladimir Putin's wife. Okay, corticosteroids are also well known to promote Candida overgrowth. Systemic steroid therapy given either orally or by injection has been long associated with immune impairment and candidiasis. Because this germ is so resistant to the human, it can protect itself from the human immune system. It's very important for anybody with this infection or any chronic yeast infection to have a strong as possible immune system. So you do not want to go on chemotherapy or be put on broad-spectrum antibiotics, or go on corticosteroids when you have a yeast infection. Here we go again. Chemotherapeutic agents, radiation, and other immune-suppressing drug regimens may also impair immunity. Vladimir Putin believes that if he didn't believe those stupid doctors, his wife would still be alive. He's tortured by this. Those Russian doctors really let him down. My personal opinion, I think the Jesuits killed his wife. The reason Vladimir Putin doesn't want to admit that this is how his wife died is because I have the same germ that killed his wife, and it torments him. Apparently he thinks it's going to be bad luck that if he admits that his wife died of the same germ that I have, that I'm going to be next. So, yeah, Vladimir, but Jesus Christ, the divine physician, is healing me. I'm going to go into that later. H2 blockers suppress the production of stomach acids. You don't want to suppress stomach acids in somebody that has a yeast infection, usually. These acids are effective barriers to prevent microorganisms from entering the gut. If you have low stomach acid and you have a yeast infection, guess what? The yeast multiplies like crazy because there are no stomach acids to kill it. Estrogen appears to play a role in creating a host environment more favorable for candida growth. Most physicians are familiar with the higher rate of vaginal candidiasis during and after pregnancy, and in association with female hormones used as contraceptives or in replacement therapy. This may explain why I couldn't sleep after I delivered my baby. I might have had the beginning stages of yeast infection back then. Remember I stated that for 3 weeks I only got 3 hours of sleep? Yeast infection can cause insomnia. Stress is well known to enhance susceptibility to viral infections like herpes simplex. Stress seems to also contribute to the development of candidiasis symptoms. Like I said, folks, if you think you have this illness, go get this book, Back to Health. And also, go see a doctor that specializes in allergy and environmental medicine. Or, if you can't afford to do that, go get this book. Okay? But you really, because the symptoms that are caused by yeast can be indicative of another illness besides yeast, you really do need a definitive diagnosis. You should probably get a stool sample done and have them do blood work to see if you have yeast toxins or allergy to yeast toxins. That's how they can determine if you've got this illness. Other infections seem to be contributors to candidiasis. Infections that produce diarrhea may well produce an imbalance in intestinal microorganisms, which may allow opportunistic candida to overgrow. Viral infections caused by Epstein-Barr and cytomegalovirus may interfere with the immune system enough to allow candida overgrowth. And I'm not going to go there right now. Obviously, if you have HIV, you're going to have problems with candida. Virulence characteristics of candida organisms contribute to their growth and invasion of tissues. Strains that possess higher degrees of adherence, like the one I have, and proteinase production have been shown to be more virulent. A theoretical role for phenotypic switching and molecular mimicry have also been described to help candida evade host immune surveillance systems. You say, what does that mean? I think what that means is that candida tricks the body, and it goes into different immune systems, and it plays havoc with the immune system. So the body's really tricked, and it doesn't know which germs to attack, which germs not to attack, which explains why when you have a candida infection, you start developing all these strange allergies because your immune system goes wacko. It gets all confused. I'm trying to summarize all this complicated doctor language into everyday language. If you really want to understand it, go get this book, Candida Toxins. It has long been known that candida species produce very toxic substances. Oh, tell me about it. That's why my nose is always running. The candida toxin, I'm allergic to it. That's why. And I have a systemic infection. Here is what's in candida toxin: ethanol, acetaldehyde, glycoprotein toxins, polysaccharide protein complexes, tyramine, candy toxin, mannan, proteinase. In fact, Japanese researchers report that certain strains of Candida albicans in the gut produce ethanol, that's alcohol, which is absorbed hematogenously in amounts sufficient to cause clinical and legal intoxication after ingestion of high levels of carbohydrate. That's basically sugars and flours, refined carbs. Any refined carbohydrate you eat, that's like white rice, wheat, that's turns to sugar in the body, and that feeds your yeast infection if you have it. That's one reason I try not to go heavy on that stuff. Candida interference with the immune system. Candida albicans appears to interfere with the ability to resist infections. That's why a lot of people who have this get sick all the time. The reason for this is because of decreased numbers of peripheral lymphocytes, decreased number of T cells, decreased number of natural killer cells, leukocyte migration inhibition, decreased phagocytosis of candida cells, decreased neutrophil attachment to candida hypha and bacteria, impaired lymphocyte transformation and blastogenesis, increased suppressor cell population with production of suppressor factor, interference with polymorphonuclear leukocyte activity. I'm talking to the doctors now. The rest of you just ignore me. Decreased production of complement, activation of suppressor T cells. Okay. To make a long story short, if you have a chronic yeast infection, you're going to get sick more often because it impairs your immune system. Candida may contribute to autoimmunity. Autoimmunity means you attack your own healthy cells. Your body gets confused and starts attacking itself. And endocrinopathy, that means imbalances in your endocrine organs, that's like your thyroid, any organs that produce hormones. They get off balance. That's because the yeast actually goes and attacks the tissues in the endocrine organs itself. And so it causes candida-induced, it can even contribute to things like diabetes. A lot of people with candida get hypoglycemia. I always suffer, especially when it starts getting severe, because the germ actually goes in there and it causes endocrine dysfunction. And I'm not going to go here because this is all this doctor stuff. Like if you're interested in it, get this book. Candida appears to cause a sensitivity to chemical odors, foods, and other allergic disorders. It's done that with me. That's because it messes with your immune system. Your immune system gets all confused. You say, how does it do that? Like I said, get this book. The reason I'm bringing this up is Jesuits are claiming that yeast limits itself to vaginitis. That means infection of your vaginal tissues. This is the most common misconception about yeast or thrush, okay? Doctors, like I said, for reasons I've already brought up, refuse to believe this disease can become chronic. They think you can fix it in a couple of weeks by taking an nystatin or diflucan and boom, it's gone, and that anybody else who says they have anything that goes longer than that or that it's become systemic is cuckoo, cuckoo. I wonder if the Jesuits invented this germ just for that purpose, to discredit their enemies. In other words, let's infect our enemy with this germ because we know we've got the doctors all hyped up not to accept this germ the way it really operates. So if we infect somebody we dislike with this germ, that's a good way to destroy them and get them labeled as crazy at the same time, because then they're going to go take all these supplements to try to deal with it because they find out the doctor's medicines don't work. And then we can just hype all that up and make them look like they're, what's that word you use when you imagine you have an illness when you don't? Oh, hypochondriac and crazy. This germ really exists, folk. It's an example of Jesuit futuristic medicine, especially the one I've got. So you've got the nutrient deficiencies, which you get gut inflammation. Have you noticed, those of you who've seen me in a bikini, how my gut's always out a little bit? You know what that is? That's not fat. That's gut inflammation from the candida in my gut. Have you noticed how the rest of me's skinny and my gut sticks out? And it gets worse at night. Oh man, at night, I think my what's that organ? The gallbladder gets really busy at night, and it's putting out a lot of bile that's loaded with yeast toxin, and I think that's why I'm so bloated in the evening. Have you ever noticed some pictures of me in a bikini? Look at how skinny my limbs are, but you look at my gut and it's sticking out like a pooch. You ever wonder what? I figured out what that is. Candida-induced gut inflammation is what you are observing. I've had that for years. I've already come to the conclusion that I'm never going to have a total bikini, body, because even if I'm not overweight, because I have yeast-induced gut inflammation. I'm always swollen down there. I've just learned to live with it. Just like this, that's yeast too. Russian antibiotic plant workers with candidiasis were treated with vitamins, presumably because their doctors knew about candida-induced nutrition deficiency. That's why Jesus told me it's important for me to take my vitamins. He said, I do want you to take a multivitamin supplement, Gail. That is necessary. So I've been doing that. In fact, I tried to get off of it to save money, and I got so tired. All I could do was lay in bed. I said, Jesus is right. I need to keep taking my vitamins, and I had to take a really good one. So I go to the health food store and buy one that's absorbed well. So I had to take a really good one. Some of the vitamins and minerals you take, that stuff, they've done studies on these multivitamin supplements, and they've actually found them undigested in the person's poop. You know what that means? It means it didn't get absorbed. So if you are nutrient, vitamin, mineral deficient, make sure it's absorbed. Then there's candida-related endocrine abnormalities. A great number of endocrine problems have now been attributed to autoimmunity. Autoimmunity, the body is attacking its own healthy cells, thinking they're germ cells when they're not. Autoantibodies may attack various endocrine glandular tissues, receptor sites for various endocrine hormones, or specific hormones themselves. Endocrine dysfunction may come about as a consequence of cell damage to endocrine organs, binding of secretory products of the endocrine glands, or dysfunction of the receptor sites for these various endocrine hormones. I've suffered from this, I can tell. Symptoms associated, and here's the doozy. Symptoms associated with chronic candidiasis. This is why a lot of doctors don't accept this illness. Gastrointestinal tract. Sores in the mouth and a sore tongue are very commonly seen. I get that quite a bit. Canker sores, heartburn. I've had that on and off. Nausea, indigestion, and epigastric distress. I've had that on and off. Gas and bloating. Diarrhea. Did you know I never had a firm stool until 2 months ago when the Lord sent me to that psych ward to get off of all my supplements, and he's treating me now. He's divinely healing me. And now, for the first time in months, most of my stools are hard. But I have had loose stools for like the past 8 years. Every day. Yeast. Constipation or alternating symptoms of constipation and diarrhea. That happens sometimes. That would happen to me. Like I'd have hard and loose stools all in the same day. That happened to me a lot. But I always had loose. All the time. You could tell something wasn't right. Anorectal itching, yep. Respiratory system, nasal congestion on a year-round basis. That's why I do that all the time. Chronic sinusitis, sinus pressure and headaches, asthma. Many patients complain of shortness of breath or a smothering feeling. I get that every now and then. Hyperventilation seems common. I haven't been getting that. I keep myself calm when that comes on because I know it's my yeast. And I just go to God and say, Jesus. Usually he tells me, drink more water, Gail. The toxins are building up and you're not drinking enough water. So I drink more water to help flush out the toxins, and then that usually helps it. Cardiovascular system, pounding heart, palpitations, and paroxysmal atrial tachycardia. Excuse some of the doctor language. Basically, that means fast heart rate. I've been getting some of that. I'm past the panic point. I already realized the Jesuits infected me with this yeast and that it's a killer yeast, but I have faith in the divine physician, so I don't worry because I'm getting better. He's doing something. Generalized edema is common. I haven't had that. Apparently, I've been managing my illness well enough that it hasn't gotten to that point. Cold, sweaty hands and feet, I haven't been getting that. Though some people with this infection might get that. Genitourinary symptoms. Vulval vaginitis and penile candidiasis. So these are the symptoms doctors generally accept with a yeast infection. What they don't accept are some of these. Dysuria, frequency, irritable bladder, and may contribute to urinary tract infections and prostatitis. Dysmenorrhea, I believe that's a lack of menstrual function. Is chronic with or your menstrual function is irregular for women who are in that stage. I'm in menopause, so multiple musculoskeletal symptoms, muscle soreness, tenderness, aching, stiffness, weakness, cramping, and easy fatigability. Yep, I've got that. Skin symptoms, acne is very common. Dry skin with hyperkeratosis follicularis. I have that right around here, just itchy and dry. I think that's yeast. Seborrheic dermatitis, eczema and psoriasis. Yeah, I get some weird skin. I cover it all up with makeup when I get here, but right around the edge of my nose, just itchy and dry all the time. I think that's related to yeast. And now that I'm releasing, now that Jesus is flushing the toxins out of my body, some of the toxins are coming out of the intestinal cells, and they're going into other cells, and they're escaping and going elsewhere. So it's very important for me to drink a lot of water. I sometimes don't drink enough water. Central nervous system, anxiety, insomnia are very common, irritability, tendency to anger, fears, panic attacks. This is where yeast can bring on psychiatric symptoms. And an impending sense of doom are common, as are worry, depression, and loss of interest in normally enjoyable activities. Depression in particular has been reported to be associated with chronic candidiasis. I haven't really had a lot of problems with depression or some of these psychiatric symptoms. And I think it's because I have an extraordinarily strong faith in Jesus. And it's helping me overcome this. Here's where it is affecting me, though. Intellectual functioning appears to be frequently impaired. Patients often describe trouble concentrating, trouble remembering things. I can lay something down and 30 seconds later forget where I put it. Indecisiveness and being fuzzy or dull-headed. This is correct, and I believe it's caused by yeast. Migraine headaches. I haven't been getting migraines, but I get some pretty nasty headaches sometimes. Tension, or especially before Jesus started treating me. Tension or muscular contraction headaches are also very common. And it can be a reaction to food and chemical allergy, which most people with yeast, chronic yeast, have. Dizziness is common. Vertigo, loss of balance, or lightheadedness. Incoordination, dropping things, blurry vision, and trouble focusing. I've noticed that. My vision, sometimes it's like it goes in and out. And I noticed this in 2002, and I got freaked out by saying, wow, I just got new glasses, and it's like everything's going in and out of focus. That's the yeast, and also it's I think it has to do with the yeast attacking the liver. According to acupuncture, the liver energy flows go right through the eyes. So I believe that there is a liver connection there too. And most people with yeast, chronic yeast problems have liver impairment. So with liver impairment, the energy flows, like the acupuncture energy flows, they go right through the eyes. Anybody who's an acupuncturist knows that I'm right about that. Metabolic and endocrine problems. Hunger and sugar cravings. Oh, especially at night for me. It's like I just crave carbohydrates. Hypoglycemic symptoms are common, which may include weakness, fatigue, shaking, anxiety, headache, trouble staying awake, and extreme hunger a few hours after eating. Weight gain is extremely common. I'm very disciplined, so I've been cutting back on my carbs, but I have had a craving for them. And there was one point in my life where the endocrine problems were getting so bad, I was getting very hypoglycemic, and I felt like I was going to faint. I had to call out at my job. This was around 2009 in the spring. I think the allergens were coming out, and that in combination with my yeast infection getting worse. It happened after I ate a bunch of sweet potatoes, which is a dead giveaway. It's the yeast. I shouldn't have eaten the sweet potatoes because the sweet potatoes that were like yeast fertilizer. The fact that it happened after I ate the sweet potatoes tells me it was the yeast, that my infection had gotten very severe. So I had to get that under control after about 2 weeks, like to a month, I got it under control. I went to work dizzy. I felt like crap. Okay, so anyways, I just wanted to give you a brief reason why I took all the supplements. It's because I had killer yeast. And I've explained it to you. And if any of you out there think you have it, I hear this illness is a lot more common than the doctors are willing to admit, especially if you've had a history of taking a lot of broad-spectrum antibiotics or corticosteroids or been under radiation treatment. You might want to check this book out and find a doctor who specializes in allergy and environmental medicine. I might be helping out some people out there while I describe my problem to show the world. Any craziness I have is probably yeast-induced, and Jesus is working on that right now. I already told you I'm off of everything. And I love it. I'm feeling better, man. Jesus said this would happen. He said, Gail, if you'll listen to me, you'll feel better. He says, I'm going to go in and heal your yeast infection. But he said, it's very important. Here's what he told me to do. He said, don't take any other supplements except a multivitamin. He wants me to take the Seroquel. He said that's part of his plan. And you say, how does Seroquel work? Seroquel actually goes into my yeast-infected tissue and flushes out the toxins from all the yeast. This is important. The yeast feeds off its own toxins. We've learned that. So you can never get over this illness till you take the toxins out of the body, and that's what Seroquel is doing. It was focusing on my brain. It looks like it's now moved down to my gastrointestinal area. I can tell. So I have to drink a lot of water. So Jesus said, go to bed at regular hours, Gail. He says, eat well. These are the instructions he'd given me. Take your vitamin mineral supplement and take an antihistamine like Zyrtec or Allegra and your Seroquel. And he said, that's it, Gail, nothing else. I will admit I have been taking a Sudafed occasionally for congestion, but I don't think Jesus minds that. The reason he doesn't want me to take anything else is because just about all of the other supplements have fillers in them that actually feed the yeast. So there you have it, folks. When you go to crazygail.com, they're going to list like 100 supplements, which is a bit of an exaggeration because I've really paired off even over the past year or so. But I was taking all of them that they list at one time or another, but I'm off of all of them now. So if they're going to say that and if they want to claim that I wasted, that's where all my credit card money went, well, it was like I had a lethal form of cancer and I was just holding off inevitable death. That's all I was doing. That's where the money went. As anyone knows, when you have a bad illness, it gets pretty expensive. So that's where all my credit card expense went. But thank God for my new doctor, Jesus Christ. And it's working because I'm feeling better. In fact, I've lost a lot of my food and chemical allergies. So I'm just going to keep on taking Seroquel and doing just what Jesus tells me to do.